Hello, class. It's Miss Roberts here, and today we're going to explore what digital media is, how it impacts our communication, and guidelines on how to communicate digitally effectively. Let's begin. Like I said before, in this chapter, we're going to define digital media, explore the way it impacts our lives, key controversies, and guidelines in regards to interacting with digital media. So when we talk about communication technology overall, we're talking about the means of recording, transferring, and working with information. So that can be such a broad definition. It can be regarding transmitting videos or transmitting text messages, text, articles, information, music. So communication technologies have definitely expanded with the expansion of the internet, high-speed internet technologies, and computers. So underneath communication media, we have digital media. And there are three characteristics with digital media that makes our world possible today. It's easy to change and manipulate versus having physical paper or physical objects. We can easily change colors in the picture or we can easily change the words. Think about the age of the typewriter. And if you had a typo, you'll have to write the whole thing again, or they might have a little button that might have corrected just some errors, but you really had to know how to spell and make sure all your punctuation was correct. But now with digital media, we're in digital technologies, we're not only are we able to make corrections on the fly, but now it also helps us with our grammar and spelling. There's also convergence of integration of information and technology. So, for example, when we think of finding information, you don't necessarily just run to the library anymore. We have information in our pockets with our cell phones or on our desk with our computers. So to find information or to seek information, it's super easy. Technology is a part of gaining and sharing knowledge versus just print. Then, like I said before, because of the expansion and the advancements in high tech and high speed internet, we can get information instantly all across the globe versus, and you might have heard of memes about this back in my day when we did have the internet, but it was dial up. You pretty much, here's how it went. You pretty much couldn't be on the phone while being on the internet at the same time. Just let everybody know when you're online. If someone picked up the phone, the connection was completely cut and the speeds were really slow. I remember waiting hours just to download a song. Now we don't have to do that anymore. So digital media allows us to easily manipulate information. We can find information with the technology a lot easier and it's nearly instantaneous but when we send information. However, there are both positives and drawbacks to this type of speed and ease in which information is transmitted. Now, we can access the information and opinion of many people, and we can also use online and digital media to share information, to complement human intelligence, to advance learning because we're able to share information with so many other people. However, because this is a relatively new technology and new phenomenon in human history, our brains have to adapt to what's going on and have to adapt with so much information coming with us all at once or having information overload. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to step away from social media or step away from the computer and just to step outside and get some sunshine, go for a walk, or maybe read a physical book for once? So by taking that digital step back, we are able to return to a more traditional time, but it also cuts down on the stimuli that our bodies and our brains are getting used to. So I'll give you another example. Say, I'll give you an example personally. Sometimes I'll scroll on my social media feed and not necessarily look for bad news, but sometimes on my feed, the bad news just pop up and show up, and I have to take a step back because I wasn't seeking that information, but I got the information all the same. So the great part about it is we can access what we want when we want at lightning speeds, and the technology and the abilities we have been able to do that. But with that speed, we have information overload, or we're able to find out news that we didn't necessarily consent to finding out. And it teaches us how to multitask, but when you think about multitasking, are you really completing each task effectively? Maybe not. Or there have been times where I'm working on an assignment and my phone's in my hand and I'm listening to Spotify and the TV's on. There's no way that I could fully pay attention to all those tasks at the very same time. So try to cut down or try to balance these these types of stimuli just so you can focus on one task or one or two tasks at a time and not feel overloaded with information. So next, we're going to talk about the uses and abuses of digital media. Now, with digital media, we're able to create an online persona. Many people have made money by branding themselves, having blog channels, creating an online persona that is a part of their career. Or in a more everyday type of sense, we have our social media profiles, we have our pictures and our videos, and by looking at that, we're able to get an idea or a glimpse to what the person is or who the person is based on what they choose to show us. One of the assignments I had you do for extra credit was the LinkedIn assignment, and this is a very curated version of creating an identity because not only are you telling or showing LinkedIn who you are, but it's a more professional context. So it's a really sanitized version of who we are. Also, digital media allows us to connect with others. But like I mentioned before, how real are these identities and connections? So one of the things you do have the right to do is you have the right to share who you are and what you're about to whomever you want. However, that isn't free from consequence. So always remember to be mindful of what you share about yourself for your own safety, but just for you to, let me backtrack. So you want to be careful of what you share. Say, for instance, you don't want an employer having to go back and say, oh, this is who you were back in the day, and you can show yourself in a flattering light. There's some parts of your life that you can keep private, and it's important to keep some of that part of yourself to yourself. And just know that whatever you put out there, just like communication, is permanent. Even if you delete it, that data is still somewhere. And just being mindful of what do you want to show us. And when we talk about being real, you have to balance that too. So, for example, we can be authentic, but you also want to be cautious and careful because you want to make sure that just like the first impressions that you make in person, what impression and reputation do you want to have in a digital space? Because it is important in our era. So when we talk about realness and identities and connections, you get to decide what that is and what that's about. But make sure to know the consequences of how real you want to get. On the flip side of this, also remember that when we're trying to compare ourselves to people on social media, that they are also creating a curated image just like you are. So don't feel bad if some parts of your life doesn't seem as sunny and as great as someone else's social media, because that is a curated image. We don't necessarily know the ups and the downs of of their lives. So just keep that in mind as well. We can also use digital media to learn things. We're learning online right now. So this is a really great space for people to get information and to learn from wherever they are. We also use it for professional communication. Think about all the Teams and Zoom meetings that we've been participating in the last couple of years. Professional commerce, businesses are also in a digital space. We don't just have storefronts anymore. So it definitely has changed the landscape of what business is, what identity is, and how do we learn. Then finally, digital media allows us to come together and organize, and that can have real world consequences. So, for example, we might have found out about a cause online, but it might cause us to, excuse me, a cause, but it might inspire us to donate or to boycott or to speak out about a particular issue out in the real world. So, organizing, coming together, finding friends, and activism can come about because of a digital space. So, the digital world and the real world doesn't necessarily have to be this separate entity. They kind of join together in this new digital landscape. Go to the next slide. But, like I said before, with this great power comes great responsibility. Sorry, I had Spider-Man in my mind. But here are some guidelines for interacting with digital media. Now, constantly manage information flow. This can mean several things. How much information do you want to take in? What type of information do you want to take in? When we think about algorithms, right? The more topics that we click on, the more that those topics are reflected back to us. So if there's certain topics that you don't want to show or don't want to interact with anymore, then you have to actively stop interacting with them and say, hey, no, I don't want to see this anymore. Also, like I talked about before, the curated image that you want to make online, just like you would in person, you want to constantly manage, excuse me, or consciously decide what type of image do you want to portray digitally. So, for example, LinkedIn is a very extreme example of a very curated image because the purpose of that website is for professionalism for the most part. But for social media sites, some brands or some pages are professional pages, so they are paying out a business, or excuse me, they're representing a business. Or you can have your personal page that represents who you are. So just make sure that you decide what information about you goes out. And then you also can decide what information comes in. Participate in how to regulate digital media. Now, in the wild, wild west of digital media, this is when I was about your age, in my early 20s. It was take in as much digital media as possible. And now we're finding out that we have to have a balance because there are consequences to consuming too much digital media. And how do we balance engaging in our face-to-face life versus a digital life? So it's up to you how you want to regulate that, but at least that's a question you can ask yourself. How much digital content and how much of my day is going to be dedicated to consuming digital content? And then, because unfortunately not everybody is nice, managing trolls or cyberbullying. So making sure that you don't engage in behavior that will be unbecoming. Making sure that you wouldn't engage with someone on social media or digital media that you wouldn't do in person. Make sure that you're always courteous. And if you are faced with someone who's not being courteous to you, don't feed into the negativity because it can happen really fast and online arguments can be documented online. So even if you have this curated image that you want to portray online, it can be undone with an online argument. And people dealing with other people attacking them, unfortunately, is still a problem that we are trying to contend with. But making sure that you limit your exposure, try to limit your exposure to too many people can help. And reporting any incidents if you see it or if something happens to you in regards to cyberbullying. So this is a fairly short video. However, let's go ahead and review what we just talked about. Digital media has definitely changed the landscape of how we consume information, how we manage our identities, and how we're able to engage in the world. Excuse me. And we use it for so many things. And there's even a term of that, the Internet of Things. I just moved into a new home and everything can be connected to the internet. My stove, my thermostat, my washer and dryer. I haven't done it yet, but I'm an analog white refrigerator type of girl, not the stainless steel fancy stuff. So when we talk about how much digital media or digital capabilities or excuse me, or digital technologies have infiltrated everything, I really do mean everything. I'm like, wait a minute, I can control my oven with my phone? Wow. However, we also want to be mindful of how we use digital media and make sure that we're not excuse me, to negativity on social media or digital media rather, and making sure that we protect ourselves as well. So overall, digital technology is very important and it's really important. It's a really important complement to our last chapter, which we talked about media in general and media literacy and some of the assignments that we are going to, excuse me, or that we are currently working on talks about how to be media literate in regards to film and video, but also in the digital landscape because our idea of media literacy has to be expanded because of the expansive nature of digital media. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions, of course, let me know. Thank you so much and take care. Bye, everyone.